The phone rang, breaking through the silence of my hotel room in Boston. As I glanced at the caller ID, I felt a grin spread across my face. It was Anna. Finally, I'd have a chance to share the news with her. The kind of news that would make anyone proud. I just closed a major deal, one that would catapult my career forward. It was more than a good payday. It was a shot at a bigger future, the kind Anna and I had dreamed about together. "Hey, babe," I said, excitement filling my voice. "You'll never guess what just happened." "Oh." Anna's voice was soft, almost distant. "What's that?" "I just locked in a deal that could change everything for us." I paused, expecting a squeal of excitement. "Maybe even if that's amazing, Dan." Instead, there was a muffled silence on the other end, like she was distracted. That's great," she finally replied. The words sounded hollow, a million miles from the Anna I knew. My grin faded. "It's a big step, Anna. This could mean a better place, maybe a family." I trailed off as I heard her give a quick sigh. "Dan, that's fantastic," she said again, but I could almost hear the impatience in her voice. "I just have a lot going on right now, right?" I took a breath, swallowing my disappointment. We'd been married for 6 years. There had been ups and downs like any relationship, but for the last month or so, something had felt off. "Everything okay with you?" "Of course," she replied a little too quickly. "I'll see you when you're back." "Okay. Just take care of yourself." As the call ended, a nagging feeling took root in my mind. There was a distance in her voice, one that had been growing since the work retreat 2 weeks ago. It was then, while we were supposed to be camping as a team-building exercise, that Ethan, my boss, had taken me aside for an impromptu meeting about a project, leaving Anna back in town. I'd thought nothing of it at the time, but now I wondered. I returned to my hotel room, tossing my phone onto the bed, my mind replaying her words, the way her voice had slipped from detached to distant. Was I overthinking it? Just letting paranoia sink its claws into my mind? Later that evening, the deal still hot off the press, I tried calling her again. No answer. I tossed my phone on the table, my frustration growing with each unanswered ring. When she finally picked up later that night, her tone was as flat as it had been before. She was distant, tense, worlds away from the Anna I'd known. As I lay down, that small, nagging doubt took a deeper hold. My mind flitted back to things I'd noticed lately. The strange jewelry I'd found tucked away in her drawer, things I hadn't seen her wear. Her sudden late nights, the vague explanations that never quite added up. The thought of calling an investigator felt crazy, but as I lay there in the dark, unable to sleep, the idea started to make sense. In the morning, I picked up my phone and dialed an old friend. Christine's voice was a balm to my frazzled nerves. She hadn't changed much since college, still calm, steady, and sharp as ever. When I called and explained the situation, she listened without a word, allowing me to spill everything. She knew my tone well enough to hear how desperate I was, how every inch of me wanted to be wrong but feared I wasn't. "Dan," she finally said, "I'll help you. But first, are you sure you want to go down this road?" "I'm not sure of anything," I admitted, running a hand through my hair. "But I can't go on like this. I need to know what's happening. I need proof, or to be proven wrong. Either way, I need the truth." We agreed to meet that afternoon at a quiet coffee shop across town. As I watched Christine approach, I almost felt embarrassed. Who hires a private investigator to spy on his wife? But Christine's confident stride, the way she held herself as she walked in, gave me a strange sense of comfort. She slid into the booth across from me, ordering coffee like it was any ordinary day at work. "So," she started after the waiter walked away, "here's the plan. We'll keep it low-key. I don't want her to suspect anything, not if we're going to get reliable intel." She pulled a small, sleek device from her bag, a tiny GPS tracker. "This can go in her car. It's compact, discreet, and will give us the basic information we need about where she's spending her time." I stared at it, feeling a twinge of guilt. But I nodded, swallowing my hesitation. She slid another item toward me, a miniature recording device. "This can be placed somewhere she wouldn't notice it. Her handbag, maybe. It won't pick up everything, but it'll be enough for us to get a clearer picture." "You've done this before?" I murmured, half questioning, half stating. She gave me a tight-lipped smile. "More times than I'd like to admit. But sometimes people need answers." As I drove home that night, my mind raced with thoughts of what I might find. There was still a part of me that hoped she was simply stressed, that there was nothing but coincidence behind her strange behavior. But I couldn't deny the way my stomach churned at the thought of placing the tracker in her car. The woman I'd trusted with my life was now a mystery I had to decode. When I got home, Anna wasn't there, which was typical these days. She'd said she had some errands, though she hadn't been specific. I took a deep breath, heart pounding as I went to her car and slipped the GPS tracker underneath the passenger seat. It felt surreal, the thought of watching her every move, something I'd never imagined doing when I vowed to be with her forever. That night, I waited up, staring at the little blinking light on my phone that showed her location. She hadn't gone anywhere unusual, as far as I could tell, but the simple act of watching her location map felt invasive. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I drifted off into a restless sleep. The next few days passed slowly, each one stretching my patience and filling me with dread. I tried to act normal, to hide the storm inside me. But every time I spoke to her, every time her explanations felt hollow, I felt myself drifting further away. Christine kept me updated, and every night I checked the tracker, scrutinizing every stop, every place she lingered. On the fourth day, Christine sent me a message that made my heart drop. "I have something you should see." My hands shook as I opened Christine's email, feeling a chill spread through my body. She'd attached a few photos, each one a grainy snapshot from a distance. I clicked through them slowly, my heart sinking deeper with every image. The first one showed Anna in a coffee shop, seated across from Ethan, my boss. His head was lowered, leaning in close to her, his hand resting casually on the table between them. Anna's face was partially obscured, but I could tell she was smiling, and not in the way she smiled at me. I scrolled to the next photo. They were walking out of the coffee shop together, his hand lightly brushing her lower back as they moved toward his car. It felt intimate, even in the smallest gesture. I clenched my jaw, trying to process what I was seeing. I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation, but there was no denying the way his hand lingered on her. I scrolled to the final image, which showed them standing outside a building I didn't recognize. Christine had left a note at the bottom: "Hotel. 1 hour stay." The floor felt like it had fallen away beneath me. I stared at the screen, my thoughts racing. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe there was some other explanation. But as I looked at those photos again, I felt my gut twist. I'd known Ethan for years, trusted him. He was my mentor, my friend, the person who'd helped me climb the ranks. But now, the man I'd looked up to was standing there, hand on my wife, and I couldn't deny what that meant. My phone buzzed, and Christine's name flashed across the screen. "Dan," she asked when I answered, her voice cautious. "I know this is difficult to take in, but I thought you should see it right away. I didn't want you left in the dark any longer." I tried to respond, but my voice caught. They went to a hotel?" I finally managed. "Yes," she confirmed, her tone gentle. "I'm sorry, Dan. It's not what anyone would ever want to find." I sank into a chair, struggling to keep my emotions in check. "Do you think there's any chance this could be a misunderstanding?" The words sounded desperate, even to me. Christine paused. "Look, I've done this a long time. There's a slim chance, maybe, but I think you know what this looks like. If you want more evidence, I can keep digging. But what I'm showing you is fairly conclusive." She was right, and I hated that she was right. As we ended the call, my mind filled with a blur of anger, sadness, and disbelief. I'd trusted Anna with everything. My heart, my future, my life. Now, those 6 years felt like they were shattering in front of me, leaving a hollow ache in their place. I spent the rest of the night pacing, replaying every conversation I'd had with Anna in the past month. All the vague excuses, the unexplained absences. I couldn't stop thinking about her and Ethan together, couldn't shake the image of him leaning close to her, hand on her back. Betrayal sank in like a weight pressing down on my chest. By dawn, I knew there was no going back. I was going to find out the truth, no matter how deep it went. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see that photo of Ethan and Anna together, his hand too familiar on her back. By dawn, I'd resolved to keep my mind clear, no more playing the fool. If Anna thought I'd stay blissfully unaware, she had another thing coming. And as for Ethan, well, my boss was about to have one of his worst career moves to date. The next morning, I called Christine, who picked up on the first ring. "Christine, I'm in. Let's get what we need to make this ironclad." "Glad you're on board," she replied, her tone light. "I've arranged a bit of a surveillance package, just in case they decide to put on an encore performance." I chuckled dryly, appreciating her quick humor. "So what are we talking about? Motion sensors? Secret spy cameras?" "Easy, James Bond," she said with a laugh. "Just a few basic gadgets, a recording device for the car, and a discreet tracking app I'll install on her phone. Should give us all the proof we need." With the plan in place, I waited. Every word, every glance from Anna became suspect. Was she aware that I'd noticed the lipstick she was suddenly so careful to reapply? Or how she'd started wearing perfume that I didn't recognize? Little tells that might have slipped past me once, but now hit me like a neon sign blinking. Watch out. One evening, when she mentioned she was staying late at work, I barely managed to suppress a smirk. "Oh yeah?" I said, as casually as I could muster. "Anything interesting at the office lately?" Her eyes flickered for a split second, a flash of something like guilt. She quickly recovered, brushing a stray hair from her face. "Nothing too exciting, just some after-hours paperwork." "Ah, paperwork," I said, nodding with exaggerated enthusiasm. "I know how much you love forms." The tension thickened between us, but she didn't seem to suspect anything. Instead, she threw a hasty "see you later" over her shoulder, and she was gone. I watched her drive off, that hollow feeling settling back in. I had to admit, though, there was a bitter satisfaction in watching her lie to my face, knowing I'd soon have what I needed. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a notification from Christine. "She's with Ethan again, and I have audio." I took a deep breath, fingers tingling as I typed back. "Send it over." Seconds later, a short audio clip arrived, and I hit play. Their voices crackled through the speaker, muffled but unmistakable. It wasn't a steamy exchange, but their casual intimacy was enough to turn my stomach. Ethan's voice was softer, a little too affectionate, and her laughter, I hadn't heard her laugh like that in months. "Looks like the paperwork's keeping her busy," I muttered bitterly, a humorless smile stretching across my face. Christine called soon after, her tone more serious this time. "Dan, I think you've got everything you need here. If you're ready, it's time to talk to a lawyer." I paused, nodding to myself. "You're right, and I know exactly what I'm going to say to them both when this is all over." The next morning, I sat in the office of Linda Jensen, a sharp, no-nonsense divorce attorney who came highly recommended by Christine. The air in her office was crisp, almost clinical, and I appreciated it. No pretense, no pity, just a clear path forward. Linda listened as I laid out everything. She barely blinked, only occasionally nodding or scribbling down a note. When I finished, she leaned back, tapping her pen against the legal pad. "So, to be clear, your boss and your wife." "Yeah," I said, feeling the words leave a bad taste in my mouth. "I know it's like something out of a bad movie. But here we are." Linda gave a dry smile. "Dan, I've seen worse, believe me. The good news is, with what Christine gathered, we can make this swift and decisive. We'll file for divorce on grounds of infidelity, and I'll ensure we protect your assets. Now, about Ethan. Do you plan to confront him?" I looked at her, a half-smile creeping up. "Oh, I'll confront him, but not here, and not yet. I want him to feel secure. Just a little longer." Linda raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Just be careful. Confronting a boss can be tricky." "Tricky doesn't cover it," I replied, my voice steady. "But he deserves a taste of his own medicine." I left her office feeling an odd sense of satisfaction. I knew the wheels were in motion, and there was no going back. Now it was just a matter of timing. 2 days later, I walked into the office, carrying my briefcase and an envelope. I'd prepared my resignation letter, along with a summary of the deal I'd closed in Boston. As I stepped into Ethan's office, he was on a call, gesturing for me to take a seat. I sat across from him, studying his face, the face of a man I'd once admired. Now, all I saw was the smug grin of a snake who thought he'd gotten away with it. He ended his call and turned to me, his easy smile a little too casual. "Dan, good to see you. So, what brings you in this morning?" I slid the envelope across his desk. "I'm here to resign, effective immediately." His smile faltered. He opened the envelope, scanning the letter and the paperwork inside. "Wait, what is this?" "Dan, you're leaving?" "That's right," I said, keeping my voice even. "Consider this my official notice." Ethan leaned back, feigning a hurt expression. "Come on, Dan. You're one of my best guys. Why leave when things are going so well? Is it money? We can work something out, you know." I held his gaze, suppressing a bitter laugh. "It's not about money, Ethan. It's about loyalty, or more accurately, the lack of it." He blinked, confusion flickering across his face. I watched the gears turn in his mind, watched his understanding dawned, and his confident smile faded. "Look, Dan, whatever you think is going on, whatever I think," I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. "Ethan, I know. I know about you and Anna. I know about the hotel. I know about every lie you two have spun to keep me in the dark. So don't insult me by pretending you're still in control here." Ethan's face reddened, his mouth opening and closing as he tried to come up with a response. "Dan, it's not what you think. Anna and I, look, it was a mistake, okay? A mistake, I said, my voice low and calm, every word laced with venom. A mistake is ordering the wrong coffee. This is betrayal. He ran a hand through his hair, looking down, his facade crumbling. Look, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. But she came to me. She needed someone. I was just there. I stood up, feeling a surprising sense of calm. Well, congratulations, Ethan. You're both going to get exactly what you deserve. I turned to leave, but before I walked out, I stopped and looked over my shoulder. Oh, and just so you know, I've been recording this conversation. So if you want to try anything funny, keep in mind I've got plenty of evidence on you. His face drained of color, and I enjoyed that moment, knowing he'd lost his grip on the situation. I walked out of his office, feeling lighter than I had in weeks, heading straight to HR to finalize my departure. As I packed up my things and left that building for the last time, I couldn't help but smile. Ethan had just received a lesson he'd never forget. I spent the rest of that day tying up loose ends, making sure every detail of my departure was in place. The strangest part was that I didn't feel the weight of regret or loss that I'd expected. Instead, I felt a sense of relief, like a window had finally been opened in a stale, stuffy room. Ethan was out of my life, and I'd soon have the same clarity with Anna. When I arrived home that evening, she was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up, giving me a quick smile, but I could tell she was distracted, barely aware of me. Hey, I said, setting my briefcase down, keeping my voice neutral. Hey, she replied absently, glancing up for a moment before returning to her screen. I took a breath, steadying myself. We need to talk. Something in my tone must have caught her attention, because she looked up again, frowning. Is everything okay? Oh, I'd say it's more than okay. In fact, I finally feel like I'm seeing things clearly. I walked over to her, standing in front of the couch. I know about you and Ethan. The color drained from her face, her mouth opening as if to say something, but she quickly closed it. I watched her eyes dart around, the wheels turning as she tried to figure out how to respond. Dan, I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, her voice shaky. Please don't insult me, I replied, my voice calm but firm. I know about the coffee shop, the hotel, the late-night work sessions. I've seen the photos. I've heard the recordings. There's no point in denying it. She sat there, frozen, her face a mixture of shock and fear. She looked away, her hands trembling. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. Like this? I let out a bitter laugh. You mean you didn't mean for me to find out? Or are you saying you didn't mean to betray me? Dan, please, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I was confused. Things haven't been right between us for a while. I didn't know what else to do. Not right, I snapped, feeling the anger finally break through. And your solution was to sleep with my boss? To go behind my back instead of talking to me? How exactly did that make things right? She buried her face in her hands, the tears starting to flow. I made a mistake. I was lost, and Ethan was there for me in a way that you weren't. I felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly swallowed by the anger that had been building inside me for weeks. You were lost? So that's your excuse? Because from where I'm standing, it just looks like you made a choice. A choice to lie, to betray, and to destroy the trust we had. She looked up, her tear-streaked face filled with desperation. Dan, please. I love you. I know I messed up, but I love you. We can fix this. Please, just give me a chance. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. A part of me wanted to believe her, to think that somehow, maybe we could pick up the pieces. But as I stood there, I realized that the woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. You love me? I said, my voice icy. Because this doesn't look like love. Love doesn't lie, Anna. Love doesn't betray. Love doesn't destroy someone's life just because things got a little tough. She reached out trying to grab my hand, but I pulled back. Dan, please. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll end it with Ethan. I'll go to counseling. I'll do anything. It's too late for that, I replied, my voice flat. I've already spoken to a lawyer. The divorce papers will be here tomorrow. This is over. Her face crumpled, and she sobbed, clutching her hands to her chest. But I felt nothing. Just an empty numbness, a sense that the chapter was finally closing. I turned, walking toward the bedroom to grab a few things. As I reached the doorway, I looked back at her one last time. I hope it was worth it, Anna, because I'm done. With that, I left her alone in the living room, her sobs echoing through the house as I packed a bag and headed for the door. The next chapter of my life was waiting, and I was ready to leave the past behind. I spent the next few nights at a hotel, processing everything in quiet solitude. The finality of it all began to sink in, each day clarifying my path forward. By now, everyone in the office knew I'd resigned, though the Rayall story was kept out of the rumor mill, at least for now. I hadn't heard from Anna since I'd walked out, and honestly, I preferred it that way. I was ready to leave that part of my life behind, just as I left my old job. The next week, I met with Michael Green, the CEO of Empire Consulting, a competing firm where I'd turned down a few offers in the past out of loyalty to Ethan. Michael welcomed me into his office with a warm handshake and a look of genuine sympathy when I told him, in broad strokes, about my split from my wife and old firm. He didn't ask questions, just listened, his face reflecting understanding rather than judgment. "Dan, I can't say I know everything you're going through," he said, his voice thoughtful. "But I'll tell you this, you're going to have a great home here at Empire. We don't just look for talent. We look for integrity, too. And that's something I know you've got." We spent the next few hours discussing my role and what would be expected of me. I was relieved to find that Michael's leadership style was worlds away from Ethan's. And by the time I left, I felt the spark of possibility rekindling. I had a fresh start, a place where my talents were valued, and the baggage of the past couldn't follow. A few nights later, as I was settling into my new apartment, I received an unexpected call from Freya, Anna's mother. I hesitated for a moment, debating whether to answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Dan, thank you for picking up," she replied, her voice filled with a nervous tremor. "I wouldn't be calling if it weren't important. It's Anna." The sound of her name hit me, stirring a mix of anger and sadness. "What about her?" Freya took a shaky breath before continuing. "She's in a bad way, Dan. We just found out that she's HIV positive. She got tested after everything happened. I felt the air leave my lungs. HIV positive. I couldn't wrap my mind around it, couldn't reconcile it with the woman I'd loved for so long, the one who had thrown everything away so recklessly. "She's a mess, Dan," Freya continued, her voice strained with emotion. "She's asking to see you. She's not handling the news well at all." I clenched the phone, my emotions churning in a strange, bitter mix of pity and resentment. "Freya, I don't know if I can help her. I don't know if I want to." There was silence on the other end, and then a soft, broken reply. "I understand, but I had to ask." After a long pause, I sighed, feeling the weight of my own conscience. "Fine," I said finally. "I'll go, but I can't make any promises." The next afternoon, I found myself driving to her parents' house, a place filled with memories I wasn't ready to revisit. When I arrived, Freya met me at the door, her face weary but grateful. Anna was inside, sitting on the edge of the couch, looking pale and thinner than I remembered. Her eyes, once so bright and full of life, were now red-rimmed and hollow. "Dan," she whispered, as if saying my name was painful. She looked at me, and I could see the weight of what she'd lost etched across her face. "Anna," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Freya said you wanted to see me." She nodded, clasping her hands together, trembling. "I know I hurt you, destroyed everything we had. And now this." She gestured toward herself, a broken expression crossing her face. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know. I'm sorry. For all of it." For the first time, I saw her fully, saw the consequences of her choices written in her tired, defeated expression. The anger I'd been holding on to felt lighter somehow, replaced by a strange, reluctant empathy. She had dug her own grave, and she knew it. "I forgive you, Anna," I said quietly, surprising even myself. "Not for your sake, but for mine. I need to let go of this, or it'll haunt me forever." Tears filled her eyes as she nodded, her face etched with regret. "Thank you, Dan. That means more than you know." We sat in silence for a few minutes, an unspoken understanding between us. Whatever we had was truly over, but maybe, just maybe, we could both find a way to move on. As I left her parents' house, a strange sense of peace settled over me. Forgiving her hadn't erased the pain, but it had loosened the chains of resentment. And as I drove away, I knew that my life, my real life, was finally beginning. A few months later, I'd settled into my new role at Empire, feeling a sense of purpose and belonging I hadn't felt in a long time. My workdays were filled with meaningful projects, and my nights were spent rediscovering hobbies I'd long neglected. The weight of betrayal was still there, but lighter somehow, its edges dulling with time. I was rebuilding, piece by piece, with a focus I hadn't felt in years. One Friday evening, After wrapping up a late meeting, I joined a small group of colleagues for drinks at a nearby bar. They'd invited me a few times before, but I'd always declined. Tonight, though, I figured why not? The past few months had taught me that embracing new experiences was the only way forward. As I walked in, a familiar face caught my eye. It was Christine. She was sitting at the bar, laughing with a couple of friends, her face relaxed, free of the intensity she usually wore when she was working. She spotted me, waving with a warm smile. I made my way over, feeling a strange mix of surprise and gratitude. She was the one who'd pulled me through my darkest moments, even if it had been just part of her job. Seeing her here, in this ordinary setting, felt almost surreal. Well, she said, raising her glass. The elusive Dan Carter finally joins the after-hours crowd. I chuckled, sliding onto the stool next to her. Yeah, figured it was about time. Didn't realize you'd be here, too. Christine shrugged, her eyes glinting with amusement. Even detectives need a night off now, and then we spent the next hour catching up, laughing over old college stories, sharing tales of our current jobs. She was easy to talk to, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I forgot about everything that had happened. We were just two old friends reconnecting, two people moving forward from the shadows of their pasts. As the night wound down, Christine gave me a curious look, tilting her head. So, what's next for you, Dan? Where do you go from here? I thought about it, feeling an unfamiliar sense of optimism. I guess I'm just focusing on what matters. Building a life that's mine and mine alone. No more living in someone else's shadow. She nodded, her gaze softening. Good. You deserve it, Dan. We left the bar together. And as we walked out into the cool night air, I realized something. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't looking back, I was looking forward. Over the next few months, Christine and I grew closer, our friendship deepening with each passing week. She'd been there when I needed her most, and now, as I pieced my life back together, she was still by my side, a steady, unexpected presence. Eventually, friendship turned into something more. It wasn't the whirlwind romance of my past, but something different, something steady, genuine, built on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. It wasn't long before I realized that, despite everything, I'd found happiness again. A happiness rooted not in the past, but in the promise of the future. In a strange way, the ordeal with Anna and Ethan had led me to this new chapter, a place I never would have reached without the pain and betrayal that had come before. Life was moving forward, and I was ready to move with it. And as Christine and I continued down this new path, I knew, with a quiet certainty, that I'd finally found what I was looking for, a second chance, a fresh start, and a future that was wholly, completely mine.